Okay, guys, I went into this film knowing that it was going to be rotten, yet I was quite surprised at just how rotten it is. And the reason being that it has Michael Fassbender. I'm a fan of most of his material. I think he's great in just about every role that he's in. Unfortunately, this film, it doesn't do him any justice. He's just left with a complete shit script and nothing to do with it. And I don't think, even if he had given an Academy Award winning performance, I don't think he could have made this any better than it is. And if better is the proper word, it has a 7% on the tomato meter and an 18% on that audience score. 11,000 user ratings, so not a whole lot, but it's not irrelevant. It's not forgotten about. It's got quite a number of people that watched this and felt like talking about how bad it is. I saw this on one of the HBO channels in the last few days. I had not heard of it before. I just saw that it had Michael Fassbender, so I said, hey, it might be decent. Well, unfortunately, it took me about maybe 2 to 5 minutes to determine that this would be rotten because I was starting to feel the boredom creep in even before all the big problems made themselves evident. And we're going to get into those because I have one of my lists assembled on that. But let's just say 2017's The Snowman. Wow, you're really strong if you can sit through this whole thing and get something positive out of it because it is that rotten. Let's get right into the audience reviews and go from there. Um, the newest one is from 4 days ago, meaning that this is in mid-February of 2020. 1.5 stars. The trailer made it seem like a good thriller slash horror movie, but the movie itself was boring and slow. Yes, I'll largely agree with that. And I think my star rating is going to be a single star. 1 star, not a smidge higher. Definitely 1 star because I found it painful to get through because it really dragged along. And I found myself wondering just when is something going to happen? You know, when is something that's a thriller or suspenseful or something that's going to be, the plot moving forward, when is something going to actually happen? Because the movie sets up something at the beginning and it does a decent enough job at it, and then it just never takes it anywhere, and we're just strung along in a whole lot of like very disjointed, disconnected different scenes. I don't understand what happened with the editing here. It's like we're all over the place, and it's even a little bit confusing as to what you're looking at. It follows this main character whose name is Harry Hole. And yes, it dawned on me right away, the pun that you could make on that. Harry Hole, really? Who, this is from a book. It's an adaptation of some kind of novel. What kind of novelist would name his character Harry Hole in the modern day and age? It just doesn't work for me. It's just too meme worthy. It's even if this were a good movie, you could make fun of the character's name. If I had that name, I would certainly want to change it because it's just it's not something you want people to get a hold of online. But in any case, the main character's name is Harry Hole, and it starts off with a little history of well, you think it's a history of him. The movie starts out showing a kid that's abused, and he's got this stuff going on in his childhood, very traumatic stuff involving the death of his mother, the suicide of his mother. And you think that's Harry Hole, but no, it's actually the villain of the story that you're never quite introduced to until the very final minutes of the movie. You don't know who the killer is in this, but you're seeing the killer at the beginning, despite the fact that the film confuses you and makes you think that you're seeing the protagonist at the beginning. Because when you're introduced to the adult protagonist named Harry Hole, he's a detective in Norway, and he's a very dysfunctional detective. He can barely show up to work on time, and somehow he still keeps his job, even though the movie shows him drinking himself into oblivion in public places and passing out on the cold, wintry sidewalks outside of pubs in Norway. And he's just laying out on the street and laying out on park benches, passed out in the cold, nearly freezing to death, because when he goes out to drink at night, he just blitzes himself and just passes out in the middle of the cold. And somehow stumbles back into work and keeps his job as a detective. It's very hard to believe. This doesn't make any sense. It's also not explained how he can just lay outside on the sidewalks while people are walking around him and the police are never called and he never loses his job, never gets a reprimand. It's very strange. However, the movie follows along with him for the most part, and he has been tasked to solve some kind of serial killer murders. And the Norwegian police department, they need to give it the audience a big lecture on, their fingerprint scanning device technology. It's very strange. Like, the movie wastes a lot of minutes showing you police procedural stuff from the Norway Police Department and how they carry these portable, like, touchpad devices with them that not only scan fingerprints, but they also serve as surveillance and interview devices, and they access police files remotely, wirelessly. It's very strange why this is so much explained to us and put in our face and factors very little in the plot. It's almost like it seemed like it was a commercial for this technology on some level, and maybe it was. Maybe it was product placement. I don't know. In any case, this movie's all over the place. You think that you're along for the ride on a story about solving a mysterious serial killer, but you're not really. You're all over the place, and Val Kilmer is in this, and he plays the movie spends a lot of time showing us this washed up, also quite alcoholic, very gross looking Val Kilmer. And I don't know how much of this is makeup and effects to make him look like a gross old alcoholic and how much is really the actual Val Kilmer and what he looks like in 2017. I have a feeling it is what Val Kilmer looks like in 2017, and it's very hard to look at compared to the way he used to be. And his voice is very strange, and he's got a very strange accent that's not Norwegian. It's just very strange and muttered, as though he's suffering from some kind of real-life disease. And later the movie shows that, surprise, Val Kilmer's detective character died a long time ago. But the movie's so disjointed in the way it shows things that you don't know if you're looking at the past, the present, the future. It's got all this mixed up stuff going on. And J.K. Simmons is in this, and he's totally wasted. He's like a Norwegian billionaire or very rich business tycoon in Norway, and he's got some big project going on involving some winter sports that need to be in Oslo. It's not the Winter Olympics, but it's something along that line. And it may be fictional for all I know. They just didn't have permission to use the Olympics in this movie. So J.K. Simmons has got this plot going on where he's like this billionaire that's trying to bring winter sports to Oslo. They're trying to win some kind of bid, kind of like an Olympic bid for the Winter Olympics, but it's not the Winter Olympics. Figure that one out. In any case, he's also on the side. He's meeting with, like, I guess what would be prostitutes and photographing them with his iPhone. And I don't... I don't know it's really weird. Like, the movie shows all this stuff happening, but it never does anything with it, and it's just very disconnected from the serial killer plot. It's very hard to explain, except that you're left scratching your head wondering, just, wait a second, we're supposed to be solving a mystery of a serial killer, and we're all over the place with all this other weird shit going on, and it doesn't add up to anything. And in the end, spoilers, the serial killer's revealed it was the kid we saw at the very beginning of the movie, and he's taking revenge on women because of what his mom did to him when he was a kid. Very cliched, and he's killed by the police detective in the end in a very cliched and unoriginal way. And that's it. There's nothing to this. There's no real theme to get. There's no point to this whole thing, and it's boring on top of it. It just meanders into weird things like pest control guys that show up to the main character's apartment or condo, and you think these pest control guys will figure, there's some nefarious goings on where maybe the pest control guy is somehow the serial killer, but nope, he has nothing to do with it, and yet it's thrown in there. It's like the movie's trying to throw all these weird things in there to, like, throw you red herrings that you'll suspect these other people are the serial killer, but none of them are, and none of them have anything to do with what's going on. Not even in a tangential way. It's just thrown in there to distract you. Very pointless. 1 star at the most, but let's continue on. 2.5 stars, January 25. An average thriller. Well, no, I'm sorry. It's far below an average thriller because there are simply no thrills. There are no thrills. After 10 minutes of watching this with some idea that you're being set up with suspense, it goes nowhere. It never goes anywhere. You just go from one disconnected scene to the next, and when you do feel some suspense start to build up, it's just quickly resolved and you move on to the next discontinued or disconnected scene, and you're just left no further along than you were before. There's no thrills, really. Calling this a thriller or calling this a suspense or a mystery, maybe it's just barely a mystery, but on every other level it completely fails. 2 stars, January 5. The Snowman is psychological thriller. No, it's not, but is barely tense. Some subplots emerge and then simply vanish without explanation. That for me is a big issue because you invest the time, the attention in something that leads nowhere, and sometimes some transitions were too sharp because it seemed the scene was unfinished. The climax is also frustrating, the final tension ends too fast, and the conclusion is almost comical. And I asked myself after watching, why a snowman? Why does the killer build it? Yeah, the serial killer builds a snowman outside of each woman's apartment or house before he kills her so that the detectives will find it. It's just a simple, short, really crude snowman with a couple of stick arms. And what's the point of that? Why does he do this? Why does the snowman need to be facing towards the apartment? Why does the serial killer throw snowballs at the victims from, somewhere off in the shadows before he kills them later? It's never explained. It's never shown in any way why that's a thing. It's just something thrown in there to be different, I guess, and it completely fails. Now, knowing that this is an adaptation of a novel, maybe this all makes sense. Maybe this whole thing is great in the novel, but whoever adapted this to film, directed this, edited this, thought this would be something, thought they were doing something cool, well, they completely failed on every level. And the only thing that was cool about this that kept me watching through the boredom was that the cinematography showing parts of Norway that I had certainly never seen before, that was interesting to me as an American because I just got to see a new place, new types of designs, new buildings, new, a whole type of environment that I see very rarely in films. I actually learned something about Norway, very little, but I learned something about Norway by watching this. That's about it. That's the only thing worth sitting for, is to actually see Norway. You get a taste of it. However, J.K. Simmons being in this, there's no point. I don't know why he was there. I don't know why Val Kilmer was there. I don't know what he's doing in Norway. Maybe he has a summer home there or something, or a winter home. I don't know why Michael Fassbender would participate in something like this. It's beneath his level, far beneath his level. I was shocked that this was this bad. I thought there would be something good about it because he was in it, but wow, it's really beneath his level. Let's continue on. I will read only 3-star and below ratings because that's why I call this rotten reviews. 4 stars, if I do find one, I just don't believe it. So here's a 3-star from November 30, 2019. It wasn't a great movie, but it was enjoyable enough for a murder thriller. Beautiful setting in snowy Norway. The acting was pretty good, I thought. Okay, fine. I didn't find any of the acting to be bad. It was weird seeing Val Kilmer play this weird, bizarre alcoholic detective that was barely in the film and got his head blown off by the time the film ended. It was very gruesome. This had some gruesome stuff, the crime scene. Not, showing gruesome stuff happening, but showing the crime scene stuff, the bodies and the mutilations and what it looks like when somebody's had their head blown off with a shotgun, what it looks like a few days later when you find the body, that kind of gruesomeness. But there was no payoff to sitting through all that gruesomeness. Enjoyable enough for a murder thriller. Well, there was no thriller. Again, there was nothing here to be thrilled about. It was just watching this stuff play out in a disconnected way, and you're wondering just what the hell all this different stuff they're showing you has to do with how it all fits together, and it never really does fit together. Wow, 3 stars. I can't believe somebody really enjoyed it that much. It's hard to believe. 2 stars, November 16, confusing, slow, and boring. Yeah, all of those. Slow and boring and confusing. Again, it had like stuff that it showed you in the past, and you didn't even know you were in the past until quite a while later in the movie. And it also didn't add up to anything. It was pointless. All over the place, disconnected. 1 star, November 7, 2019. Well, at least Norway and Michael Fassbender are beautiful to look at. Well, yeah, like I said, just the cinematography around Norway, and you got to see, what it looks like in Oslo and etc. That was interesting, but that was the only positive thing I could find in this film, and I agree on the 1 star completely. Let's take a look at my list. Yeah, the first thing I wrote down when this movie opened, and I was still taking it seriously and considering that it might be a good film, is that it gave us like we basically sat through part of a fingerprint scanning class for some kind of new technology that you can carry as a detective into the field, and you can collect fingerprints electronically and run it against a database, and it has this camera built in for interviews, and we had to actually sit through a class with some police personnel who are being introduced to this technology in a classroom setting by some contractor in Norway. Yeah, it really struck me as like we were seeing some kind of product placement of some type. I don't know if it was intended for police departments to see this and you know get some kind of interest in this technology. I don't know. That's the way it struck me, and it didn't figure in anything else in the plot. It just seemed like basically ad placement on some level. What else is on my list? Yeah, I don't know if this is a thing in Norway or this is a thing just that's a failure in this movie. I don't know because I've never been to Norway. But a lot of the architecture, people's houses and apartments feature very large glass windows. A lot of these places, these buildings feature this. Maybe this is a common architectural theme in Norway. Certainly you can have large amounts of glass on buildings and apartments, and it's fine as long as it's a very much insulating, double pane insulated windows. However, it's like shown that nobody actually has curtains or blinds. Now, I don't know if this is accurate to Norway or not, but some parts of this movie, the plot only works because everybody's like sitting at home behind these large glass windows, and nobody has curtains or blinds drawn at night. And in fact, a lot of the windows don't even have any curtains or blinds attached to them at all. So I don't know if that's a Norway thing. Maybe it is in their culture that they don't use curtains and blinds like Americans do. Or maybe that's completely wrong and the film just fucked that all up. It's hard for me as an American that's never been to Norway to tell. But a lot of this movie in the plot, it only functions correctly because people don't have windows and blinds, which as an American, that's very strange. We don't like, being all lit up in our living room behind a giant glass window at night, and the neighbors across the street can just watch us from the outside, or people passing by on the sidewalks at night. We can't see them, but they can see us. We don't really like that in America, so we draw the blinds at night or the curtains or whatever. But in Norway, it looks like nobody does. At least that's what this movie shows. So anyway, what else is on my list? Yeah, this detective Harry Hole, I still can't believe I'm saying that. He passes out on the sidewalks outside bars and just lays out there all night. Nobody calls the police. People just step around him and kind of prod him to see if he's alive and just keep walking. Yet he never encounters the police. They never scoop him up and arrest him for drunk and disorderly. He never loses his job or gets a reprimand. He just shows up to work. And in fact, it shows him waking up on random couches in places like in public buildings and then just going right to work. And he looks like he just got up off a bench somewhere and went into the office. I'm sorry, but Norway or New York or LA or any other big city, there's no way this guy would still have his job as a detective. It just makes no damn sense. Yeah, is anything relevant going to happen? This film went through a lot of its running time, and I was asking myself, when is something relative to the plot gonna, relevant to the plot, actually going to happen. And it was quite a ways into this, maybe to the halfway mark, before the plot itself started moving forward. Oh boy, it was just a real disaster there. What else is on my... Yeah, there are a couple of twin sister characters in this. Now, before I said the acting was good, well, yeah, except for there's one actress that plays a couple of twin sisters. Her acting is really bad. It's so bad that at one scene it looks like she's reading her lines off a card and she's barely trying. It's really bad. And I've seen her in other things. Let's go through and look at her name. Her name is, it would be Chloe Savigny. Anyway, I've seen her in other things. She plays two different characters that are twin sisters. Um, her acting's so bad, it's embarrassing, but everybody else's acting performance was fine. I didn't notice any problems with it. So anyway, just as an aside, she should not perform like that again if she wants to keep her acting roles. Let's see. Yeah, what is Val Kilmer's voice? It's very strange, like he's suffering from some kind of real life problem, like lung disease or something. And in any case, you can tell that they overdubbed his dialogue at points because maybe he just sounded even more cringeworthy bad. So some of his dialogue, he's really speaking it, and at other times you can visibly see that they've overdubbed somebody else's voice onto him. And it doesn't work either way. There's definitely something going on with his health that he just shouldn't have been here. I guess he just needed a paycheck and he was conveniently in Norway for the shoot. Really, we didn't need him. He was a distraction. He didn't figure into the plot in any way. He could have just been totally cut out. I don't know why. I needed to see, him in this condition. It was almost hard to look at him like this. And I could tell it was real. It wasn't just his character. There was something seriously wrong with him. So anyway, let's go into some more audience reviews. Half a star, October 16, 2019. It's impossible how utterly dull and dumb this movie is. With so much talent behind the scenes, where did it all go wrong? Yeah, let me read off the cast. You had Michael Fassbender, Rebecca Ferguson, Charlotte Gainsbourg, J.K. Simmons, and of course Val Kilmer. How did any of these people think this was a good idea? Why did they need the paychecks if that's what happened? All of them have been in much better things, and they've all performed admirably in much better things. They've been put to use, especially J.K. Simmons. Why was he in this, and why did he need to be there, and what kind of weird accent was he pretending like he had? It wasn't Norwegian, it wasn't British. It was almost like J.K. Simmons was trying to do that old what do you call it, what is that old accent that the actors like Cary Grant and etc., they would perform this weird accent? It was called, not cosmopolitan, but, I don't know. It was that weird fake Hollywood accent that was popular back in the day. And it was like J.K. Simmons was trying to do that accent, but he did a really bad job of it, so I just couldn't tell where the hell he was supposed to be from, even though he was supposed to be Norwegian. I don't know why he thought he had to do an accent at all. He should have just stuck with his regular voice because it wouldn't have made it any worse. But let's continue reading this. The story was nonsensical with zero thrills, and the actors looking like they were going through the motions, almost as if they could tell how bad it was going to be. Well, I'll say that, yeah, the one girl that I talked about, she was really cringeworthy bad, like she wasn't even trying. Everybody else, I thought it was okay, except for J.K. Simmons. He shouldn't have tried that weird accent that just didn't need to be there. Again, I can't remember the name of it. It's the same accent that Franklin Roosevelt had. It's not real. It's what the Hollywood crowd would do back in the day, back in the golden age of Hollywood, to, I don't know, make themselves seem more cosmopolitan. But it's not called cosmopolitan. It's called, oh, transatlantic. That's what it's called. It's like J.K. Simmons was trying to do a transatlantic accent, except it failed. It didn't even work in that regard. But anyway, half a star, full of those pointless deviations from the book that offer nothing but to water down the plot and the characters. Again, I know this came from a book, and it's probably it's got to be one of the worst book adaptations I've ever seen because if something was popular enough to be made into a movie, you can bet that it was a decent enough novel, at least to the audience it was targeted to. So I'm just going to go out on a limb and say this was a big fail, the worst kind of adaptation that you could ever want to make as a director. And the director, Thomas Alfredson. I don't know anything about him, but he needs to find another line of work because even in the editing room, this was fucked up so badly I was left confused, and a lot of other people were. Half a star, September 2019. One would have thought that the trustees of the Nesbo estate would have had some say in what was purporting to be the cinematic representations of one of the finest Scandi books ever written. So, again, this was a good novel, apparently. To cap it all, Sophia Helen gets 5 minutes screen time, if that, an utter bodge of a movie. I hope the production crew don't get a stab at another one. Yeah, I hope that, in particularly the director, that he just like finds another line of work because he's just demonstrated that he's completely incompetent. 1 star, one of the worst films I've ever seen, and I once watched Spice World. Well, I'm not going to review Spice World, thank God, but I'll take your word for it. 3 stars, difficult to follow at times, but decent enough for a Friday night watch. Well, maybe if you're totally bombed on Norwegian vodka, this might be decent. You can follow along with Detective Harry Hole, pass out when he does, and you won't be missing much. 3 stars. Get out of here. Come on. 1 star. It was a neat idea, just not executed properly. I don't even think the idea was that neat. We've seen serial killers in a cold environment before, done in much more interesting ways. The fact that this guy builds snowmen, big whoop-de-doo. I wanted to see something a little more interesting than that. 2 stars. Reader's Digest version of plot from novel would be virtually unintelligible if you hadn't read the book. Nice scenery, but characterization not a strong suit. Okay, so people that have read the book have enough actual stuff, material to work with, and that's why they say this is okay, and it's 2 or 3 stars. But I didn't read the book, don't know anything about it, so for me it's just a confusing mess. I don't know what the hell is happening or why or how all of this stuff that seems very much irrelevant to the plot of the serial killer fits together. I couldn't figure it out. 1 star, August 2019. The fundamental idea of this movie is good, but the storyline is incredibly long-winded and boring. Yes, it is boring. You think it's suspense at first where you see Detective Harry Hole walking alongside his ex-wife's outside her apartment building or her house and just peering on her while he's walking by in the dark, and you think it's going to build up to something, and you see a lot of that, where somebody's being watched through a window with no blinds at night, and you think it's going to add up to something, but then it just becomes boring because it never has a payoff, it never goes anywhere. If anything, the serial killer is taking his damn sweet time killing people. He really is, because I found his serial killings to be boring, and you didn't even really see him killing anybody. You just saw like the bodies that the police would find later. Very boring. He took his sweet time. You could say he was the most boring serial killer of all time. Half a star. The Snowman fails to engage and suspend. It's also pretty dull. The detectives figure out nothing, not even the most important question, why are we making this? Yeah, the detectives, you would think the police would be on this, they would be investigating things, finding clues. No. The detectives spend a lot of time sitting around in some kind of library, and they're sitting at their desks in what looks like, I guess it's supposed to be some kind of police station research area, but it looks like a library, and they're just sitting at tables with filing cabinets, and they're not doing a whole lot of investigating, but they're collecting salaries. I mean, that would be an easy gig, right? You call yourself a police detective, and then you sit mostly in the library and read some books and some files, and then just like kind of collect your stuff and go home. Yeah, that's like seems like the good life, right? Except I wouldn't want to live in a snowy place like Norway. That's not my thing, but in any case, it was very boring. 2.5 stars. July 22nd, 2019. There was a lot of hype coming into this film in 2017. Really? I don't recall hearing anything about it, but okay. And unfortunately, it didn't live up to it at all. There were some good elements, but as an overall package, it was very, very average. Well, it wasn't very average. I think that's because this is another reviewer that actually read the book. To him, this is average because his mind is filling in stuff from the book. It makes sense somehow. To me, not having read the book, this makes absolutely no sense. I mean, yes, I understand at the end that the detective killed the serial killer. I understand that, surprise, surprise, the kid that we saw living the abused life at the beginning, he was actually not the detective, but he was the serial killer. I understood that, but I didn't understand a lot of the disconnected stuff going on. Why was J.K. Simmons a rich philanthropist character? Why was he taking pictures of women's breasts? Like, his personal assistant was bringing him women, and he would take a picture of their breasts. And when he met beautiful women at a party and just introduced himself, and before he would leave, he would take a picture of her. What was the point of all that? What did it have to do with anything? This movie had stuff like that in it all the way through, and I was like, how does any of this crap relate to anything that's supposed to be along with the serial killer? I mean, it never did, and I don't understand what the hell was going on. Again, all these people, this cast, what were they doing in this? Why did they think this would be something, or did they know this was just a paycheck? I mean, I don't get how they thought this was a good idea. You look at that critic count, 7%. So out of 190 critics, only 7% of them had something good to say about this. That tells you a lot. 18% on the audience score. I think that's fair. That's my conclusion with this too. I have a hard time believing anybody would rate this more than 1 star. Um, I'm saying 1 star just because I got to take a look at Norway, and now I have an idea in my mind about Norway and what it's like maybe in the wintertime. It may not be accurate, but at least I have something to go on now, whereas before I watched this film, I didn't know jack shit about Norway except what I have seen in old World War II movies that probably also weren't accurate to today's Norway. So, I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to say please don't watch this unless you just want to get bombed on vodka and just pass out halfway through. Maybe you'll find something here, find something interesting if you don't end up with a hangover at the end. Otherwise, skip it. Don't put yourself through this, and I will see you on another episode of Rotten Reviews.